Ayan. Ayan. So, good morning. Maayong aga sa aton nga tanan. First, I would like to thank the organizers. Madamo gid nga salamat for inviting me to be part of this webinar series. And of course, thank you also to everyone joining us this morning. I am very excited to share to you about this emerging food processing strategy called the pulsed electric field processing. And today I will be talking about its potential and yung kanyang mga current applications. So my presentation is composed of 5 different parts. First, I will give you just a very short introduction on pulsed electric fields. Second, I will be discussing its mechanism of action. And the third part would be, I will be sharing to you my PEF research. And after that, I will present to you other food processing applications for pulsed electric fields. And lastly, I have listed some of the companies that are using PEF in their respective industries. So to start with, pulsed electric fields, or PEF or PEF, is a promising emerging food processing method that involves the application of these short pulses of high voltage across food that is placed between these two conducting electrodes, okay? So these short pulses can range from milliseconds to microseconds. So how does PEF work? So PEF affects the product structure or yung product cell structure. So it can be of a plant, pwedeng animal, pwedeng microorganism, okay? So in our figure here, we have a plant cell. And as we all know, a cell is surrounded by a membrane. And if you look closer, pag mag-zoom in tayo dito, membranes are made up of phospholipids. And due to the properties of the phospholipids, the membrane can be seen as a non-conductor. Kaya naman, if we apply external voltage, there will be charge accumulation and increased potential. And if this happens, it will result to the formation of a pore in the membrane. And the process of pore induction with PEF is referred to as electroporation. So due to the high electric field pulses, cell membranes develop these pores. So pwedeng generation of new pores or pwedeng enlargement ng existing pores. And these pores can either be permanent or pwede siyang temporary. So therefore, we can either have a reversible or irreversible electroporation. And these, of course, depend doon sa operating or processing conditions. And pag meron na tayong mga pores sa ating mga membranes, of course, we can expect increased membrane permeability. Ayan. So we are also aware, di ba, the structure-function relationship. So when we say, quote-unquote, structure of a material, so this refers doon sa assembly of complexes and a different hierarchy of structures in it. So yung structure ng native material or yung unprocessed or yung original state of a material changes when we expose it to a different environment or kung pinrocess natin siya or when it undergoes PEF treatment at certain effective levels. Kaya naman, if there are any change in the structure of material, for example, because of PEF treatment, it may have significant observable change on how the material functions or how the material behaves. So for example, pwedeng magkaroon ng changes in how the material behaves in the GI tract or the gastrointestinal tract, or there can be changes kung paano or how the material releases certain compounds, okay? As mentioned, there are certain levels wherein PEF processing can impact significant change in the material that is being studied. At yung effectiveness of PEF when applied to a material is affected by several key factors or parameters. And I have listed some of them here. So the first one is electric field strength. So we can actually adjust this by changing the distance between the two electrodes that we use during processing. Then we have the specific energy input. You can also manipulate this. You can also look into the effect of pulse shape, pwedeng unipolar, bipolar, exponential, or square wave pulses. And you can also play around pulse width, treatment time, and pulse number. But when you look at the literature, among all of these, yung first two, yung electric field strength and the specific energy input, these are the ones that were reported to have the greatest impact or yung nagkukos ng great changes as an effect of PEF treatment, okay? So there are actually a number of published studies reporting the impact of PEF in certain food materials. And for example, merong mga studies that look into the impact of PEF on the properties of cereals, legumes, tubers. Meron ding mga studies on PEF, studies looking into the impact of PEF on the properties of fruits and vegetables, like what we have here, strawberries, grapes, citrus fruits, carrots, and meron ding studies that were conducted to investigate the impact of PEF doon sa properties ng meat, seafood products, and algae, among others, okay? At saka marami pa pong available researches for other different raw materials, okay? So, pero sa aking research, for my personal research, I actually investigated the effect of PEF treatment on oat flour properties. So, dito sa aking project, I want to understand how PEF treatment affects the physical, chemical, and the functional properties of oat flour. So, I tested different levels of intensities of PEF treatment. At yung sabi ko nga kanina, yung dalawang parameters that were reported to have the greatest impact, yun yung aking sinama sa aking study, and that is the effect of different levels of electric field strength at saka different levels of specific energy input. Okay, so when I started, my hypothesis is that PEF treatment will affect oat starch molecular structure and therefore alter its functional properties. So what I did was, because I was dealing with the technology on a relatively new field, I used this inverse triangle strategy. And that is from a general perspective, and then you go towards a more specific approach. So I investigated first if there are significant changes doon sa overall functionality of the product. Like for example, dito, yung buong sample mismo. Before I go into in-depth studies, and then later on deep diving into a more specific assessment ng structure at different levels, a macro level, and then going down dito sa molecular level studies. So basically, when significant changes are detected, then of course it would be reasonable for me to follow through with structural analysis to help me understand the observed functionality changes. So ano po yung nakita ko sa aking study? So what did I found out in this study? So I learned that at elevated electric field strength, PEF treatment of oat can affect yung crystalline and amorphous lamellae of the starch. And this impacts yung na-observe na thermal properties. And then this ultimately affects pasting and starch digestibility properties, okay? On the other hand, pag naman elevated specific energy input along with the influence of temperature, merong changes doon sa surface properties of starch granules, and this promotes aggregation. And if this happens, nagkakaroon o naaapektuhan ang particle size ng sample being studied, okay? And particle size of the granules also affected yung thermal properties, and then starch digestibility and pasting properties. And of course, aside from that, I also found out that protein network at yung structure ng proteins were also affected, along with the observed leaching of components, okay? So ano ngayon yung potential applications of these findings? So the data that I gathered served as baseline information on the impact of PEF on oat flour properties. And basing on this, PEF processing may be used doon sa production of food products with customized glycemic impact. So I will elaborate on this in the next slide. PEF can also be used to promote the release of health-promoting compounds. And PEF can also be used to tailor oat flour with desired properties. kung ano yung mga kailangan natin or gusto nating properties ng ating oat flour, then we can tailor it using PEF processing or PEF treatment, okay? So going back to what I mentioned earlier or in the previous slide, the PEF processing may be used in the production of products with customized glycemic impact. So this was evaluated with starch digestibility experiments, and the results were quantified based in the amount of glucose released. Kasi nga, our starches are made up of several glucose units. So I have two bar graphs here. I have the one on the left is for samples that were PEF treated at low electric field strength. And the one on the right are for samples that were PEF treated at high electric field strength. So we have digestion time dito sa x-axis, and then we have the amount of glucose dito sa ating y-axis. And results of our starch digestibility studies shows that when oat flour is PEF treated at different capacities or intensities, yung in vitro starch digestibility results also showed varying levels of glucose that were released. Okay? Pero makikita natin na dito, both in the left and the right figure, both in the low and high electric field strength applications, yung highest levels of glucose released from those treated at high energy levels. So we have yung blue bars and then yung on the left, and then we have the dark orange bars on the right graph. And from the same data, we can also compare yung amount ng glucose released according to the levels of field strength applied. So here, it is evident that at high field strength, yung amount ng glucose released is lower compared doon sa kanyang counterpart. So I have put lang line para mas madaling makita. So we can see here lower amount of glucose released compared dito sa graph on the left. So with this data, we can say na yung susceptibility ng starch to digestive enzyme actions varies with PEF treatment applied. Okay? So ano ngayon yung significance of the starch digestibility data? So it shows here that smart selection of PEF parameters will allow us to manipulate yung starch digestibility ng oats. It can provide us options to produce food products with increased or lowered starch digestibility properties depending on the dietary needs of our clients, of our consumers. And this is what I call ingredient customization. So you can tailor, you can customize the food product according to what is needed by the consumer. So if they would want food product, or if they would want oat flour with increased starch digestibility, or if they would want an oat flour with lower starch digestibility. Okay? So that is all for my PEF research. So aside from the findings from my own PEF research, PEF was also utilized in other food processing applications, including the following. Number one is yung PEF treatment for inactivation of microorganisms. So na-mention natin earlier yung mechanism of action ng PEF treatment. So dito, the principle of electroporation can be applied to microorganisms through yung permeabilization of the cell membrane. So it loses the natural barrier function and therefore it loses its activity. As a result, yung mga microorganisms will be inactivated. At yung advantage ng PEF compared to ordinary preservation methods is that merong reduced thermal loading to the product, and yung mga heat-sensitive pigments, nutrients, and flavors are therefore not affected and are retained, or if affected man, very minimal lang. Okay? Another application ng PEF is the use of PEF in the snack industry. PEF has been used successfully in the potato processing snack industry since 2010. So, ang main applications ginagamit siya sa French fry production and chip production. Okay? And also, another application is the use of PEF for drying. So again, yung concept of electroporation, it opens the cell membrane and therefore increases internal diffusion in the product and faster evaporation. Okay. And another one is PEF for extraction of valuable substances. Again, the same principle of electroporation for cell disruption and the resulting discharge ng cell. So yung cell extract, it may contain valuable substances, and among other things, meron ka ng mga discharge and all. So this means it can also be used to increase yung yield for juices or yung acceleration ng extraction process. And then another application of PEF is on improving the peeling behavior. So PEF is influencing yung plant cells. This was seen also in tomatoes. So in the process, yung entire tomato was subjected to PEF treatment, and this makes the skin easy to separate from the pulp. Okay, and we also use PEF in meat processing. So the PEF treatment would induce changes in the structure of the meat. And so pag nag-marinate ka ng meat, yung brine solution, it will absorb more quickly, and this reduces processing time. So again, there's a lot more of other applications ng PEF treatment, at iilan lang po ito. Okay, so I will show you some photos of PEF treated products compared with yung other processing methods. So ito po ay figure I got from the DLG expert report from 2018. So makikita po natin dito yung color difference between untreated sample, the one on your left, the thermally treated sample, the one in the middle, and the PEF treated green smoothie, the one on the right. So makikita natin na after processing, we can see color retention in PEF treated samples. Then we also have, this figure shows a difference between yung untreated and nasa left, and yung PEF treated beetroot and carrot chips. So here we can see a much better product color with PEF treatment. And then another figure, okay, this is very interesting when you look at it. So this figure shows the impact of PEF treatment on freeze-dried strawberries. So you will see, ito po yung untreated, ito po yung bago i-freeze-dry ay nag-undergo muna ng PEF treatment, and you can really see yung difference, okay? And then of course, because this, I wanted to also provide specific examples na sana, hopefully, researchers that use PEF in the fish processing industry. So I have a number that I have listed here. So we have, in 2016, Zhao and Zhao used PEF treatment for the extraction of protein from mussels. Okay, so here in this research, they were able to extract yung protein from the mussel at a much faster speed. And according to the report, yung extraction yield din ng kanilang protein is higher compared with traditional methods. And they have maximized it to more than 70%. Okay. And then we have yung the use of PEF for ingredient extraction from fish bone. And this was reported by He et al. In 2016. So they combined dalawang processing strategies. This is semi-bionic extraction method and the PEF treatment. And they have reported rapid extraction of ingredients like calcium, chondroitin sulfate, and collagen from fish bone. So yung industrial or practical application with this one is that yung fishbone hydrolysate can be processed into compound products suitable for absorption and utilization by the digestive tract. And then another one is PEF-assisted protein extraction, as reported by Lee et al. In 2015. So they have used PEF-assisted enzymatic extraction para doon sa protein from from abalone viscera. So nakita nila that it was fully hydrolyzed and meron silang high product yield. And they also reported good emulsifying properties of the abalone viscera protein compared doon sa purely enzymatic extraction. And they have reported increased solubility and reduction of viscosity of the protein. And then another one, Godmanson and Halftenson in 2001 reported the impact of PEF treatment on the microstructure of salmon raw. So they reported na-observe nila na merong mga gaps dito sa salmon raw after PEF treatment nung sample. And then Kropotova et al. In 2021 applied PEF treatment as a pre-treatment prior to brine salting of sea bass. And they have reported that PEF treatment effectively shortened brine salting time from 5 days down to 2 days. And this has also increased the salt uptake up to 77%. At nireport nila na mayroong homogeneous distribution of salt in the muscle and no significant difference in the water holding capacity and water activity of the sample. Okay? So, andito na po tayo sa last part ng aking presentation. So, this is on the industrial application of PEF. So, ano na ba yung mga industries that has been using PEF commercially? So, first, it was used, the first one I have here is the use of PEF in potato chip production. So this was used or is used by Amica Chips. So this is a company based in Italy. And what they do is they PEF treat their potatoes. And yung result nun is that they have a softer at saka yung flexible yung potatoes that are easier to cut and process. And they reported higher yield because less yung breakage. At saka nag-improve yung cut consistency. And because of that, nag-extended yung knife durability. And they have reported lesser oil uptake doon sa product when it was PEF treated. And it allowed them to fry yung kanilang potato chips at a much lower frying temperature. Okay? And then PEF was also used for olive oil extraction. So this is the Aceites Malagon company. This is based in Spain. And they have used PEF treatment for to increase the yield and increase the productivity for the extraction of their olive oil. And they were able to do this at ambient temperature. And then we have PEF treated grapes, which are used for wine production. So ito ay industrial scale PEF trials with Aragoneses, bodegas, and wineries. So dito, merong enhanced extraction ng compounds. They have reported faster extraction. They have reported reduced wine maturation time and increased production capacity. Okay. But then I want to go back doon sa application ng PEF on fish processing industry. Despite the existence ng maraming reports on the positive aspects of PEF technology at lab scale, yung application of PEF in fish processing industry is rather limited. So yung transfer of PEF technology to the fish industry would actually be very or highly favorable due to the low energy consumption and short processing time required in PEF processing. Yun nga lang, this technology transfer would require further investigations on the impact of PEF treatment on other quality parameters of fish products. So more studies are needed, particularly on the areas of maybe tenderness, color, oxidation, weight loss, water holding capacity. So some of the research gaps that can still be addressed. So let me end my presentation by presenting to you an overall summary of the advantages and drawbacks of pulse electric field processing. So dito makikita natin the one on the left, the advantages. So it is efficient in inactivation of cells. PEF is suitable for processing heat-sensitive products. It can be used for many solid and liquid foods. It allows better retention of color, flavors, and nutrients. Very short treatment time. It is free from health-threatening solvent because you can just use pwedeng buffer, simple buffer, pwedeng water as your conducting medium. It is environment friendly. And there is a very big possibility of combining PEF with other processing techniques para mas ma-enhance pa yung properties ng ating products. Okay? On the drawback side, yung disadvantage, hindi naman disadvantage, but the drawback is that this is an equipment, so you need to have, this is capital cost, so high capital cost. Another one drawback is also yung unavailability of commercial units in many regions of the world. Ang marami nito is around Europe, China, and then yung presence ng bubbles may lead to non-uniform treatment as well as operational problems. At meron tayong limited engineering, limited economics and engineering studies for upscale continuous process. Although the list under drawbacks are considered major issues, hopefully with continuous research, we will narrow this gap and eventually fully maximize natin yung potential of PEF treatment in the food industry. Ayan. So maraming salamat po. Thank you very much for your attention.